everyone, and welcome to the Jam Yearbook. I'm Matt.
And I'm Jim. We've noticed that December is typically a slim month for album releases, so we have chosen to combine it with November. You might have noticed there was no November anniversary show. Well, it's real slim pickings when it comes to great albums getting released in November and December. But don't worry, this show does have some great albums, and we're going to give you 2 months for the price of one.
Yeah, so I'm going to kick us off with our first poll winner, and it's probably the biggest album on the list that we're going to talk about today, Pink Floyd's The Wall from 1979. No surprise that this won the poll. Absolutely. I even entertained telling you not to put it on the poll, and just so we could talk about it in the show, because we knew it was going to win. So why not just give another album a chance? But you know, I've never really had a Pink Floyd moment. So I can't offer any deep experiences with The Wall. Floyd is kind of like a solo thing with me. It's not really a group event.
I've definitely had some Floyd moments, and some of those were group events, maybe in a living room with a lava lamp and a lot of smoke in the air. But, aside from covering Another Brick in the Wall and Comfortably Numb in bands that I played with, you definitely had to have at least played those songs.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I'm not saying I never sat down with the bass or guitar and played along with the whole album. But The Wall by now, by the time you're our age, it's just kind of been built into this mythological thing. And just to clarify that, while I enjoy this album, I know I'm coming off a little bit grumpy there. I've just never had that oh damn experience that a lot of people when we were younger would say about with The Wall.
Yeah, I know most of the music from it just from classic rock radio when I was growing up, but I never owned it until I was in my 40s and I bought it on
Oh
vinyl.
wow.
Yeah, I was more of a Dark Side guy.
Hmm. Yep.
But I did grow up with this constant fear of watching the movie because, you heard about people that were tripping on acid and went crazy watching it or these, stories like that. And I had that same timid feeling that I probably had the first time I watched A Clockwork Orange. I
Oh
just
yeah.
felt like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to see crazy mad shit. And then I
This is
watched it and
dangerous.
I was like, it was cool, but it was not I'm still sane, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. It's like trying to watch The Exorcist now.
Yeah, I don't
When
watch
you're
that. I've never watched it.
oh really? You
Yeah, I
should
can't watch
because
that.
again, you're gonna have the same experience. It's been built up to this thing, but when you watch it, you're so used to how things are produced now, and you're like, oh, okay, good try. But do I lose any cool points for having never seen the movie of The Wall?
Uh, uh,
I don't know if that probably implies I had cool points to begin
yeah,
with,
I was going to
but
ask you.
and by the time I found out that this was a concept album, which I love the idea of those, I'd heard the songs out of context, mostly on the radio. So by the time I heard the whole thing, it was just like a disconnected experience for me. And I am more of an Animals fan. That's my favorite Floyd, and Dark Side's a close second, right? The Wall's just a little bit further down the list for me.
Yeah, and it's not like I can pretend it didn't have any impact on my life. My most recently purchased guitar is named Vera. And, I try to think of my favorite song on it and realize that that changes when I think of the album. It just kind of depends on the mood that I'm in. And when I was getting ready to do the show, well, it was Young Lust. That was the one I wanted to go back and listen
Okay.
to, 2 or 3 times. But you got to admit, the guitar solo from Comfortably Numb has to be in the top 10, maybe top 10 of all time as far as being a recognizable guitar solo.
Oh, without a doubt, I can't disagree with you there. That
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
absolutely iconic.
And sometimes I feel like I don't need to hear it again, and then the song comes on when I'm not expecting it, and I can't turn it off, and it hits me like the first time I'm hearing it all over again. David Gilmour's tone just created emotion that very few guitarists are able to capture.
Yeah, it's all him. It's not just in his equipment, but it's how he plays. It
Yes.
shapes that solo and it can never be duplicated.
No.
So moving on, we're going to cover The Clash in London Calling. London Calling is an exception to our argument that double albums are bloated
Well,
suckfests.
this is two now. This is two double albums in a
Exactly.
row.
Oh my God. Yeah. Holy crap. Well, 70s, there was a lot of double albums going on in the 70s.
There were.
And but here I couldn't pick a song to trim off. They showed incredible growth, which I've complained about in the past. Again, that can ruin bands, but they do in a way that it feels like they're not trying to prove a point. They're not doing anything they're not comfortable with, with whether embracing reggae, ska, pop, rockabilly, or straight up rock. It's a departure from the previous two albums, but their energy is still there. They're still singing about societal problems. The growth here, finally, in a band is for the best.
This is probably sacrilege to anyone that has ever respected my taste in music. I never went through a Clash phase in my life. I know their songs and I like their songs, but I think, like your experience with a lot of other bands that we talk about, the Clash has just kind of always been there. I know every song on the album, but if you asked me to name three-quarters of the songs by playing it to me, I couldn't do it. I really enjoyed listening to it this week. It'd been a long time since I'd listened to London Calling. And I love how Clash made punk feel like it could cross genres. And of course, I had to do my monthly gym deep dive because I felt like if I was going to ever have a conversation about this album, I'd be talking out of my arsehole trying to keep up with somebody. The album has been in the top 20 of multiple greatest album of all time lists. But I think the coolest thing I read about it was that when they went into the studio, they had writer's block. Can you imagine? You got one of the greatest albums of all time, but
Mm.
when you actually went to go and record it, makes me wonder if they were kind of under contract with the label. And so they had to put an album out within a certain amount of time. And it was almost like going to work.
Yeah, and they were probably, because this album is a lot different, they were probably intentionally trying to just break out of a rut or a mold.
Well, with Mick Jones and Joe Strummer, they're the songwriters for the band, and they had nothing when they went into the studio to record. They'd put out an EP earlier in the year that had a song on it that was a couple of years old, and then some cover tunes, and that was it. But what they did was they set themselves up with a strict regimen. They would practice in the afternoon, have a friendly game of football, go to the pub for a few beers, and then practice again in the evening. And by doing this, they came closer together as a band and it really got their creative juices flowing. And I'm not going to lie, I am jealous. That is the life. Can you imagine? That's your day of work and going to the studio, practicing.
It's the life I've always wanted to lead.
Yeah, that was my 22-year-old dream. And once again, we talk about iconic with Pink Floyd. You have possibly the most iconic album cover of all time with the Clash's London Calling. It might piss you off, Matt. I know some people get angry about it, but there are probably people out there today walking around, in fact, not probably, definitely, wearing the t-shirt with this album cover on it, and they've never heard a Clash song in their life.
Oh, I guarantee you that's happening.
Yes.
It's like the little hot topic shirts. It's like somebody's walking around with the Ramones, never having listened to the Ramones or the Sex Pistols,
Absolutely. Yep. Yep.
right? But because it's got this kind of edgy appeal, and the artwork can be cool too.
Smashing a guitar just looks
Yeah,
cool.
oh, it does. Always looks cool. I don't know why. It just is. So we're going to skip ahead a couple decades to Tom Petty and Wildflowers. I don't understand the longevity of this album. I've seen polls where it gets voted as his best album. It's probably the me thing. I was more into it's 1994. They got the whole alt and grunge thing going on. So I didn't give it much of a chance at the time.
The same thing happened to me with a couple of albums from these years in the early 90s. I wasn't giving it a fair shake at all at
Yeah.
this time in 1994 because I was too busy listening to grunge and alternative rock. Petty was yesterday's hero in the music world for me by this time. I also think that his earlier stuff kind of had a raw sound. And when he came to Full Moon Fever, it changed that and smoothed his edges. And speaking of edges, he was aging, and the music industry didn't have that appeal for angst that we were getting as, young 20 somethings, the
You needed the
alternative
angst to
rock.
be in a different form.
Yeah, it just wasn't there. This
Yeah.
album is, it's pretty.
Yes, yes, it is. And I think I made this comment a while back that newer generations don't want their angst from somebody 20 years older than them
No, they
either.
don't.
They want
Yeah,
it from a voice of their generation.
yep. We need to be angry together in our
Yes.
generation. Yeah.
Yes.
And I do really like the title track. I think I heard it
Yes.
randomly once and had no idea where it came from at the time. And so, like I did, oh, I love this song, Wildflower, Tom Petty, went and looked for it. And then I found out, oh, it's the title song off of this album that came out in 94 that I completely ignored. It just goes to show that Tom Petty, really wasn't on my radar in this time. And but like I said, the album's very pretty, and I think this song is beautifully composed and has really sweet lyrics. Petty almost reverted to his more classic sound with "You Wreck Me," but I think that's kind of as close as he gets on the album. You could possibly say "Honeybee," but that's more of a bluesy tune, and
Mhm.
Tom Petty wasn't really a blues rock guy in his late '70s, early '80s raw form.
Yeah, his voice doesn't really suit that kind of form. You Wreck Me's a great song, though. I'll just
It is
add
a good
that.
song.
And also, I think people just like singing songs about rolling another joint. There's just this. It's like drinking songs, right? One bourbon, one scotch, one beer. People are just gonna want it. It's a party song
Do you
to
remember when
a
the
degree.
song was on MTV? I remember seeing the music video though,
Yeah.
and they
Yep.
couldn't say joint on
No.
MTV, and it was on backwards or even on
Yeah.
radio. So yeah, let's smoke another.
Yeah. And this album kind of it was a continuation of him trying to separate and grow apart from the Heartbreakers sound that started with Full Moon Fever and then into the Great Wide Open, which to me, those are just better albums. And I think part of my disconnect with this is I was just ready for him to go back to the Heartbreaker sound. I had heard this version of Petty and I just wanted him to
Hmm.
go back. This era really kind of caused problems with members of the Heartbreakers because it's like, no, we're Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers here. Sorry, a little mush mouth there. Because it's got to be tough being the and the part of a band.
When we were chatting with each other and you brought that up, I wanted so badly to go look up that that was an urban legend and that they really didn't mind. And I even argued with you that, it probably was to sell records and to make a change. But no, you're right. They were pretty upset. And I think one of the guys quit the band after Tom Petty kind of went on his
Hmm.
own, went with
I
that
think
solo
it
name.
might have been Benmont.
No, Benmont, it was
Did
the
he
drummer. I think the
stick around?
drummer left because he
Oh, I
picked up a
think you're
new
right.
drummer. Yeah,
Even on those albums, I don't know if it's because he created a stinker, but I believe Mike Campbell still played on the stuff.
he did. Mike Campbell wrote some of the songs on Full Moon Fever,
Yeah, so that could be a show we do sometime, the second banana show.
Yeah.
And hey, at least it didn't happen to the news. It's always been Huey Lewis in the news.
Yes. Yes. But what about Hall and Oates?
I'm gonna pinch you. I kind of hate myself for having to agree with you on that.
Yeah, what does John Oates do? That's the question.
Exactly. Oh,
He wears a great mustache. That's what we'll have to talk about.
he does. And tease here. We're gonna get to another second banana later on in the show too.
Yeah, we are. We are.
So we've been to the 90s. Let's go back to the 80s, 1984, with Madonna and Like a Virgin. Did you ever turn off a Madonna video in 1984?
Never. But I almost came close to turning the album off when I was listening to it to prep for the show. I know you struggle with some 80s sounds, and the hits still sound like the hits on this album, but there are some songs that really just sound empty. Like there's nothing there. And I think this is where you find that 80s production failed in those moments.
The mid 80s is where a lot of pop jumped the shark for me. We'll be talking about another album from 1984 later. I think this might be part of the same tease I just had. That's going to make me sound conflicted in my opinions. I had to be younger for synth pop. And I was really surprised listening to this. I didn't know anything past the hits, and I never did a deep dive with headphones. And kind of like what you said, it's very thin sounding. It's like an audible version of plastic surgery. Everything just sounds so fake. And did you pay attention to how her voice sounded?
Mm.
it sounds almost sped up. Like you ever discover an old cassette tape where you recorded yourself talking and how much higher and thinner your voice sounds? That's kind of what I'm getting here.
I think you
This
probably have me on tape.
I probably do.
Yeah.
Probably making fart sounds or something.
Yeah. But they are higher pitched fart sounds.
Yeah, it's that.
Slowly releasing a balloon. But it's a little unsettling, and I might piss some people off with this opinion, but I've never really seen Madonna much as a singer anyway. She's
Preach.
yeah, she's an entertainer. The funny thing is that when, it came to her performances, grinding to like a virgin, to my 12-year-old self, when this came out, that wasn't it that did it for me. Call me old fashioned, but it was the Material Girl video that made me sit up straight when it came on. I think it was played homage to Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend with Marilyn
Yeah, Marilyn
Monroe.
Monroe. Yep.
Yeah, and it really worked. But this proves my point. The very first thing you asked was about her videos, and yep, I'm just going to talk about those. She was an entertainer. I dare say, if she tried to break as a radio star in the 1970s, maybe she would have had a one-hit moment, but I don't think she would have become the icon that she became and is today.
It wouldn't be a surprise to learn that's the opinion a majority of the people have about Madonna. Again, boring. I can't argue with you. And she's 26 recording this album. She should sound stronger vocally, right? But it's pop. It's the overall package and being entertaining and markability. Those are the top priorities. Listeners who voted might think we're being a little unfair, and yeah, we are maybe a little grumpy again. Um, and I have to blame the Christmas music I've been listening to lately.
Yeah.
And we also took the album in as a whole, right? Which can
Yes.
reflect on the hits. If there's
Mhm.
no connective tissue within the whole album, no ebb, flow, um, it can, for me personally, I'm not going to speak for Jim, it diminishes the hits. But again, listening to the hits, I'm like, oh dang, I remember this. And it kind of puts you back in time, that whole time machine listening to an old song. I remember
Yeah.
where I was when I was seeing this video and blah blah blah.
Yeah, blah blah blah. That's enough then, Grumpy Matt.
Yeah.
What I do find funny is I'll move us along and we're going to go back ahead to 1994. And this is TLC, Crazy Sexy Cool. And I just want everybody to know who's listening to this that Matt's not grumpy about this album. He's just not decided to say anything. In the
Yeah.
notes, it's a case of I'm going to let Jim do all the talking because
Yep.
this is not my music from 1994. But it does go to show that he doesn't have anything to complain about with it. It's
That's right.
it's a case of I don't think it's bad. It's just not for me. And I appreciate that you didn't just write up something complaining about the album, and you also didn't try to pad this out with flattery that doesn't belong there from you. Some of the albums we've talked about since we've been doing the anniversary episodes have really been surprising to me. And we have to admit, we are at the mercy of our audience. When I put TLC on the poll, I expected some kickback from you because, well, I knew it was a big album at the time. I don't think either of us realized how big this album actually was. And in 1994, I was definitely more willing to go out and buy that Tom Petty album from the start of the show before even coming close to putting this album on. And I'll speak for myself, but this was the furthest away from anything I was listening to in 1994.
Yeah, in 1994, again, we're into flannel and goatees,
Yeah.
but we were well aware of its existence.
Oh, yeah, we were. We had MTV, it was all over.
Yep.
And I think when we make changes in life, conscious or not, we kind of reject our old selves and embrace the new. This album couldn't have been a more complete Jim Jam album. We've had discussions earlier in the show where we wondered if 1990 or 1991 was the pinnacle or when it stopped. And this might have actually been it. If it had come out 5 years earlier, I probably would have known the lyrics to half the songs on it. I mean, the beats are so smooth. The lyrics, they're not simple. They're poignant and deliberate, empowering women with an early statement against toxic masculinity and opening eyes to the abuse of drugs and violence in low income communities. I dismissed TLC as another prepackaged band until this week. And then I went and did my usual dive. This album went 12 times diamond, the step above platinum. And it's considered the biggest selling girl group album of all time. So I'm really glad that thank you, audience and poll, for forcing me into listening to this because I really enjoyed it. It stands miles above anything we've ever gotten from Destiny's Child or Pussycat Dolls or Little Mix could ever achieve. Musically, I would say maybe I enjoy the Spice Girls as a close second to TLC, but their songs didn't tackle the deeper issues or emotions the way that TLC did.
I was blown away when you told me that. That whole diamond thing and them being the best selling, and I was quizzing you. Spice Girls? Are you
Yeah,
sure?
yeah.
Yeah. And then on my own, we had stopped talking. I'm like, wait a second, even En Vogue? And yeah, surprisingly, TLC's the champ. I was completely surprised by that. Probably more surprised than actually really liking this album. 90s R&B was not my thing at
Hmm.
all. I am more of a 70s R&B kind of person. I absolutely love that music. It's just that the 80s and the 90s weren't the best for that because it became more poppy and hip hoppy in ways. And I like how in the album cover, right, it's got their three faces and it's
Hmm.
crazy, crazy, sexy, cool. And of course, it reads left to right and their pictures
Crazy
left to right.
is left
Left eye
eye.
is crazy, Hilly is sexy, and T-Boz is cool.
Yes. One thing I'm going to note about this album before we move on, I was in the store the other day and doing some Christmas shopping, and I heard a Little Mix song come on, and I had just listened to the TLC album, and I realized something that we've complained about before, something we definitely have noticed with Beyonce and Destiny's Child, is a lot of these girl groups, a lot of these pop stars that have come out in the past 20 years or so are all yelling singing. And what I liked about
Yeah.
TLC when I listened to this album is that they might not even have the best voices in the world, but they're really singing. There's a real soulfulness that you get from somebody who's really giving you that moment where you're getting a real emotion from it instead of just trying to stand there like you're trying to project to the back of the house, on
Yeah,
stage.
because in a lot of those groups, you always feel like there's somebody that's trying to separate themselves.
Hmm.
And I never got that vibe with TLC. It's like they
No.
were all on the same page,
Yep. Yep.
rising water, raises all boats. I will say you kind of mentioned this vocally. It's just that it seems like the key they're trying to sing in is just right at the edge of their register,
It is. Yeah.
right? Because it's very low. It doesn't take away from the songs. These are good songs. Who doesn't know or love Waterfalls?
And they also write their own lyrics in a lot of these songs. So, or they did. And that's something we can't say about all the other girl groups that we've brought up, even the Spice Girls. Those songs were brought to them.
Yep. And I did a little deep dive too. And, a lot of times you get these girl groups, you want to think that they were just immediately created in the studio. But no, they had some growing pains in coming together as a group,
Hmm.
different members and this and that. So the polish doesn't always mean there wasn't a struggle.
No. All right, move us on.
1999, Dr. Dre, 2001. This got the cool kid votes. Of course. Who's not going to vote for
No,
Dr.
no,
Dre?
you're
Come
not
on.
wrong. And I like this album a lot. I have both this and the Chronic on vinyl, and this gets spins every now and again. The next episode is up there with all of my favorite Dr. Dre songs. I'll always look back though and think now in the late 1990s, everything was a little cooler if you attach something about the year 2000 or whatever to it.
Oh, yeah.
But but what was the
Yes.
point of naming it 2001? I actually did look this up, and apparently Death Row released a record called 2000. This Dr. Dre had left Death Row, and he originally was
Uh,
going to name this album Chronic 2, A New World.
the Electric
Uh,
Boogaloo.
wait, it gets better. Chronic 2, A New World Odor, not order, odor.
That's
Papa's got a brand new funk.
a mouthful.
Yeah.
But instead, he just chose to go to
He
11.
just, yeah, let's go to 2001. It actually was also known as the Chronic 2. So that was another reference for it. But without a doubt, when you listen to it, there is a sense of someone trying to prove themselves here. He had, like I said, he'd stepped away from Death Row Records. Songs like "Forgot About Dre" and "Still," do I say Dre or Dre? That's how it sounds. The song spelled. But they're him trying to make a statement that he was still around. It had been 7 years since The Chronic. He'd done a lot of producing. Some people felt like he wasn't really actually a great a rapper, so he wanted to do something that proved to the world that he still had it. But by the time this album came out, another generation was taking over the music world.
Yeah, Eminem was huge
Oh yeah.
at the
Yeah.
time. And Dre was a producer, probably first and
Hmm.
foremost. But that's not to say he's a bad rapper. He's a good rapper. He's got a great voice for it. And you listen to a lot of old or like original rap, and it sounds just like somebody not spitting into a microphone. They're just kind of like
Hmm.
reading. There's no like they're just kind of trying to go with a tempo. They're not just speaking from the heart. Lyrically, maybe they are, with the words written on the page, but the delivery isn't quite there. It's a little
Yep.
robotic. It had, it's obviously evolved into a really there are times where the art form's kind of intricate. It's, you got to listen to the delivery. This is the first time I've listened to this whole album as well. And I was kind of like, oh, I really like the Chronic. And so you know how sometimes you have that bias, oh, nothing's gonna touch the Chronic
Hmm.
kind of, but this did I liked it. I liked it a
La
lot.
da da da
It's
da.
clack, it's yeah. Yeah. Who does, I am starting to get a little tired of Snoop though. He
Yeah.
needs to cut it out with the with the
He is
commercials.
everywhere. Yeah. All right, so let's move on and talk about the other albums that were in the poll. And those are the five that we had that won, which was great. Thank you, everybody, for voting. We're super happy we had the chance to talk about that and, maybe listen to them.
Yeah, sorry.
But we thought we'd show some respect to some of the other albums that were in the poll. Matt, not even in the notes because we forgot it. And I questioned back and forth whether I should talk to you about it or not, and whether it deserved to be in the poll because it's definitely not an album of original music. But 1994, Nirvana's MTV Unplugged.
Oh man, I forgot. I was gonna mention that to you as
Yeah.
well. Um, I think we should talk about it because I don't know if I want to call it iconic, but it's Nirvana.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, and they do such a great job embracing the meaning of doing this unplugged.
Yes.
So, I've seen a lot of them and they just got too elaborate as they've gone on. They've kind of lost that initial reason for doing it. Strip these songs down. I almost swore there. I had to hold myself back. Let's strip it back because I don't think a lot of drummers can do what Dave Grohl did on this and hold back in the purpose of this of the atmosphere of, and how these songs should be played.
Yeah, he gave a masterclass in minimalism when it came to drumming, and that's
Mm.
just as important. And do you remember when they played All Apologies? It was like the first time that a lot of us were like, "Oh, Dave Grohl's singing. He can sing too."
Yeah.
It was the first time I'm sure, he did a lot of backing vocals when they played in concert, but it wasn't something that everybody knew until we saw this. Also, the introduction of Pat Smear with them,
Yes.
playing live in front of a television audience. And Pat Smear went on and is still with Dave Grohl with the Foo Fighters. The covers,
Yeah, I love how the Foo Fighters have just grown into this family of
yeah,
musicians.
and the covers on Unplugged. The Man Who Sold the World. How much money do you think Bowie made after
Oh,
that was everywhere? But a
I'm
great
sure.
song. And in fact, if you ask me to play The Man Who Sold the World, I'm probably going to choose the Nirvana version over the Bowie version.
Yeah, because it's more somber.
It is. It is.
Yep, and I really like that acoustic
Yeah.
performance. It's perfect actually. All right, so now for some, let's move back into the planned portion of the entertainment. We got a lot of 94 albums to talk about because it's time for Pearl Jam's Vitology, the album that had me turning off Pearl Jam, really. Because Better Man is a song I never need to hear again. It's right up there with Daughter. The melodies are just kind of boring. And in listening, I'm like, oh, Corduroy's still kind of good. I'm like, no, I've just heard it too much. It's not my brand of Pearl Jam that I
Mhm.
like.
I had the same opinion 30 years ago, but that changed when I gave it a listen this week. I've actually gone back and listened to a lot of Pearl Jam and what they released from this to Yield, No Code, some of their albums over the past 6 months or so after their new album came out this year that I enjoyed the most since probably, you know, Verses or even 10. I just really liked this album that came out this year. But I went back to kind of listen to the growth of Pearl Jam and what got them from 10 to where they are now. And I can kind of see there was some transitioning going on with their music and their songwriting. Of course, every band in the world wants to go out and be the biggest band in the world, or at least you would think so, unless your name was Eddie Vedder, who did not want to be in the biggest band in the world.
No, he did not.
But when this came out, it pissed me off because it was such a departure from 10 and the Pearl Jam that I loved. As an album on its own now, I don't think it's that bad. Am I running out to buy the vinyl or throwing it on after we finish recording? No. But
I can give you my
yeah, you've
copy.
got one there. Hey, you know what? The vinyl looks cool. The album cover's cool. It looks great on it.
Well, yeah. I got it when it first came out. I was really high on this. I'm like, I was excited, and then I think I just set myself up for a letdown,
Hmm.
and it's just been a little bit hard for me to get over. And Vitology ranks really high on a lot of lists that I saw, as high as number two. And I don't think I saw one where it was out of the top five.
Wow.
So either it's me being grumpy again, because I really haven't had many nice things to say about too many of the stuff we're talking about today, or this album's getting the Pinkerton treatment. I understand defending a band through a bad album. I'm hating the sin, not the sinner. Love the band, don't like the album. And judging what they were going through, David Brucey's he got axed at the end of recording the album. Eddie getting more control and the tension that usually follows that when somebody starts to exert a little bit more control. And they had been straight out since 10 and probably could have used a break, but instead they picked a fight with Ticketmaster and rolled right into recording Mirror Ball with Neil Young that we'll get into next year. They get nothing but A plus from me for effort. It's just that as a whole, this album just kind of it's like which I appreciate every song being its own thing, but there's no connection from song to song. It doesn't flow for me. It doesn't make sense. Bugs is like 3 minutes of my life I'll never get back every time it comes on. You know, at first I'm like, oh, this is funny, quirky. But it's like, no, now it's just annoying.
Well, hey, do you really want to be annoyed? We'll talk about the album that came out in 1989 because we have definitely spent not enough time talking about Phil Collins, but seriously, that I
What an
actually,
appropriate title right
yeah,
about now.
but seriously, Phil Collins. This album almost made the show, and I was worried that it was going to, because you want to talk about Grumpy Matt. If we'd had to listen to the whole thing and try to come back and talk nice about something because the people, who listened to the show voted it to come
Oh,
on.
wait, we're supposed to say positive
Oh,
things
sometimes,
about poll winners?
but I'm glad it didn't. But seriously, people, enough with the Phil Collins love after No Jacket Required. He peaked there after about 5 years or so in the 80s and somehow wound up being an icon. And he marketed himself well, branching out into movies, but not a single ballad on this album can touch Against All Odds or In the Air Tonight, Another Day in Paradise or When Rain Down on Me. Oh, is Eric Clapton playing guitar on it? Shut up. I don't care.
I don't give a shit. I hate Eric Clapton too. Jesus
I've wasted
Christ.
enough time here for me and Phil
Yeah.
Collins.
And we've trashed this album plenty in the past, not on just one show, multiple shows. And I think that's probably why we don't mind talking about it because we don't mind trashing it. And you can chalk it up to Phil Collins overload. I'd go as far back as 1980, the Genesis album Duke, the hits Misunderstanding, Turn It On Again. You could even stretch it out to 78 with Follow You, Follow Me off Then There Were Three. Hey, that was a rhyme. I'm a poet. Look at that. But a decade or more of Phil Collins's hit after hit after damn hit. He wanted to cool down, so he decided to make a movie, but then had two number one hits off the Buster soundtrack. It's like, come on, mission not accomplished, Phil. Jeez. And until But Seriously, I was on board as much as I could be through my hair metal years. this album's just not very good. I hoped, again, hope is evergreen. I was hoping to, a fresh listen might lighten my opinion, but it did not. And I challenged myself to say something nice about this record, Jim. The horns are insane. They
Oh,
really are.
that's really
The
nice
horns
of you.
are
I,
insane.
I
They're
challenge
impressive.
I challenge anybody to come on this show and defend this album to us and just wait to suffer the
Oh,
abuse that we're going to
I
give you.
love that idea.
All right, let's go back 1984 and Don Henley building the perfect beast. Boys of Summer might be one of the top five songs to sing along to when driving, even group singing. There are five of you in a car, everybody can belt it out to this song. Even if you can't sing as high as Don Henley, everybody is excused. It's just a sing
Exactly.
along song. This song was made for car stereos and cruising down the road.
It's like everybody's do you remember that episode of Seinfeld where the guy had Desperado as his song and everybody had to shut up?
Yeah.
Right? It's almost like this song is almost like universally that for everybody, except everybody's singing along
Yeah.
passionately. I'll never hate this song. And again, I'll bring Mike Campbell back into the conversation from the Heartbreakers. He wrote the music for this. Henley wrote the lyrics. Petty turned this song down. Which makes sense. It's not really a petty song. They could have made it into a petty song, but I think it would have diminished it because this version with Don Henley is superb.
Yeah, it's his song.
Keeping in 1984, Brian Adams, Reckless. I don't. This wasn't on the poll, was it?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
It was on the poll.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised because this album was everywhere. It was
Hmm.
hot at the time. I mean, it was really
I think if
smoking.
we had put Brian Adams' Summer of '69, it probably would have made the show.
Oh, because I mean, this was one of those albums where he could have released every song and it probably would have charted.
Hmm. Yeah. The album was on nonstop in my house. And I do think it kind of slow burn. I think it was released in October. And yeah, it had a hit, but it didn't really take him to that icon status until midway through 1985. But this was my personal soundtrack that year. There was a lot of Combs singing in my bedroom to Reckless. I used to love the song Kids Wanna Rock. I was a kid, and he was correct.
I had turned my nose up to it at the time because I was a huge fan of Cuts Like a Knife, and I kind of wish that album had garnered as much of the spotlight as
Hmm.
Reckless, but I was lying to myself. Reckless is a great album, and it deserved all the love it got. It's not all bad news today, folks. I was happy about a few things, and I'll always admit where I'm wrong. Well, maybe not always. Not to Jim's face. Not to Jim's face.
Well, let's go to 1979 in your happy place.
Yes, Slade. Slade and Flame. And now for a show for one. Me. I love just a reminder that there's a band called Slade. I love very, very much. I can't be the only one. Slade and Flame follows two number one albums for the band in the UK.
Mhm.
So I know I'm not alone here. Jim Lee and Noddy Holder can write some fun rock songs. Slade in Flame is a soundtrack to a movie starring the band. They chronicle the rise and fall of a band called Flame. Yeah, that's about what you'd expect from a movie starring a band. I added the song How Does It Feel to our monster mega playlist. That song will always get regular airplay for me. It's amazing how some songs avoid the fatigue factor.
There are definitely listeners who love Slade because Slade is still considered one of the greatest classic rock bands of the 1970s era in Britain. People love them here. So don't worry, Matt, you're not alone. If you came over
Good.
here and we went out to the pub, I think if we were in a rock pub, music playing, you are going to hear a couple of Slade songs.
I would love that.
Yeah.
So now the anti-Slade and Christopher Cross. Christopher Cross.
Christopher Cross. Yeah, just name my album and my name is the title of the
The
album too.
the original Chris Cross.
We just need to share that our friend Stacy informed us that he was on acid LSD when he wrote the lyrics to Ride Like the Wind. Was he watching Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid? Go read these lyrics. I never realized they were about a cowboy. It sounds like a guy on a horse escaping to somewhere, and it's pretty funny since it's such an iconic yacht rock song.
Why is this so funny to me that So just take a song like Ride Like the Wind, just picture the melody and all the music going on in your head. You would not expect the guy that wrote this to be tripping balls when he
No,
wrote it.
no, no.
But it's the 70s, there was a lot of that shit going on.
All right. So let's get to our albums now. These are our choices, everyone. Matt gets to pick an album to come to the show. I get to pick an album. I believe both of our albums were in the poll and didn't make the show. And that's often how we pick our albums for the
Yeah,
show because we're angry.
lazy.
Yeah, no, we're angry. This album should have made the show. So I talk a lot about being 12 years old in this episode, or, I like to talk about the years when I was discovering music. And I think 1984 was probably a bigger year for me than I realized. My 12-year-old self would be seriously pissed off if Wham! Make It Big didn't get some respect in this show. I was really surprised to find out George Michael produced this album. Without a doubt, there are some strong 80s sounds on the album, but there's also a timeless aspect to it. Careless Whisper, one of those iconic saxophone lines, without a doubt. Freedom's such a great song. And people, George Michael had to hide the fact that he was a gay man in the 1980s. Go watch the video for this. He was always trying to tell us who he really was. And if any of our listeners have ever played Grand Theft Auto Vice City, this was my favorite game to just drive around in a video game in an open world and let the soundtrack play. The song Everything She Wants from this album was a highlight for me. And as much as I never need to hear Wake Me Up Before You Go Go Again, I fondly remember being in fifth grade and going to a junior high basketball game. The cheerleaders got up at halftime and did a routine to the song. And I marked this as the exact moment that I realized, wow, who needs action figures? I really like girls.
Again, 40 years later, I finally listened to this entire album, and I was quite surprised more votes weren't thrown its way either. I really thought this was going to get more votes than Madonna. I kind of hoped it did because maybe we wouldn't cover Madonna. But the hits were inescapable at the time, and any 80s radio station or mixtape wasn't complete without them. I enjoyed this much more than I ever could have imagined. And you're right about that Careless Whisper sax solo. I put it right up there with Baker Street. It's identifiable. It's a good song as well. And curiosity got the better of me, Jim. Oh, this might be the deeper dive that I probably shouldn't have taken. It's especially because it's not from a year that we'll cover anniversaries, but curiosity got the better of me, and I listened to Andrew Ridgeley's solo album. It's as bad as you might think. And I'm sure he's a swell guy and a terrific musician, but it made me seriously question what he did in Wham.
And there's your second banana, people. There he is.
There's see, we teased it at the tease was perfect. Well, maybe it wasn't as big of a reveal as we were hoping.
Your curiosity always gets the best of you because of you sending me that extended dance remix version of
Oh
Madonna's
my
Material Girl.
Lord. That keyboard at the end,
I don't
that
know.
was that was that was
It is
ridiculous.
literally just like, let's just hit all the keys. And, musically,
Yeah,
it doesn't need to make sense. So we're just going to just randomly hit
yeah.
these.
It's like it's like, can you follow a melody? Jeez. All right. So we'll get to my album. Actually, Jim, surprise albums for me. You got the honorable mention last time. I was a little conflicted, especially when I look back at my list and I'm like, oh crap, I forgot about Triumph and Thunder 7.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Right. So in 84, this is going to be my last chance to talk about a 1984 hair metal album, even if it is hair adjacent, because Triumph was more of a power trio,
Hmm.
but they came out of the 70s and they kind of just merged lanes with hair metal for a while. But great songs. Spellbound, Follow Your Heart. There's a great little ditty called Time Cannon where it's kind of like a vocal melody leading into another song, but I just the way the voices are kind of just mesmerizes me. And I like bands with two singers. I know that might be a little bit disjointed for people
No.
because it can create an unknown package. It's like you're expecting this, and then all of a sudden, whoa, you get that. I understand that. But the Beatles did it and it was great. I'm not going to compare, Triumph to the
Triumph are the
Beatles,
Beatles.
or even
Yeah.
Kiss. Kiss had two singers and they had a level of success, but I can understand how people want their one lead singer in a band. But I enjoy that. Thunder 7, great album. Now my real pick, which I was really surprised again didn't get more votes, was Queen's Sheer Heart Attack. So I was a little discombobulated this time because I was gonna have Slade, but then Queen I thought was gonna be a shoo-in. So yeah, I'll just cover
Wait,
Slade,
wait, you got three
forgetting about
albums because you didn't get to talk about
yeah.
Slade. You said it
I
was
got
the
to talk
Me
about
Show.
Slade.
Then you got Triumph.
He's on to me. I admit that outside of greatest hits collections, a Queen album can be a challenge because many times the connection from song to song is the unpredictability of it all. You never know what you're going to get with Queen from song to song on an album.
Hmm.
Outside of people who play guitar, Brighton Rock isn't a catchy tune, especially for a lead off to an album, but it's still awesome. And I won't say Brian May isn't recognized enough for his work, but more times than not, when people talk about guitarists, the conversation kind of revolves to Page and Hendrix, more straightforward rock. But May is one of the most imaginative and creative players with his sound completely and entirely all his own.
Oh, definitely. When I put this album on, I was Brighton Rock, and I'm not as big of a Queen fan. And sorry, all my British friends who are probably going to pummel me for saying that. It's not that I'm not a fan. I just never went through a Queen phase like so many people have. And when Brighton Rock starts, it starts off so subtly. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, the song's going now. Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
It's almost like it comes from in the distance and then, comes creeps up on you. And now we're in the song and here we go.
Yeah.
But Queen are the rock gods of the UK. And I'm also surprised that this didn't get enough votes to be on the poll. I think this should have been traded out with Wildflowers, in my opinion. But I'm glad you chose it because it deserves to be talked about. We often talk about bands having their best material in the first couple of albums and then fading away. Queen is one of the exceptions to this. And I'm not going to knock the album or say this one's bad. Killer Queen and Stone Cold Crazy are well known classics. But I
Yes.
also think Queen rose from an era where psychedelic rock was crossing over to the 70s era classic rock that we grew up and are more familiar with. But you're spot on about Brian May as a guitarist. His tone has never faltered, just like David Gilmour. But I even sometimes think you hear Brian May's guitar solo and you know that sound. It is as recognizable as any other guitar player ever.
Oh, his guitar tone just has a bite to it. It cuts through the mix.
Yeah,
You'd instantly recognize a Brian May guitar solo.
yeah.
The band is awesome because, well, for so many reasons, but again, unpredictability. And I don't know if it's how bands will reinvent themselves. I don't think Queen ever reinvents themselves. They are just constantly evolving and creating completely, entirely new, very original music.
Every single member of the band Queen, I've said this before, I'll say it again, is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame songwriters
Well
hall.
deserved.
And so
Queen, yeah, Queen's awesome.
these songs were all written by the entire band, which you talk about having two singers in a band, but how many bands out there do you know where every member of the band shows up and contributes a song on the album? And I think that's
Yeah,
why it makes these albums sound a little discombobulated from time to time because you're going to have a variance because
yeah,
you're going to show up one day with your song you want to be on it. I'm going to show up another day and
yeah.
Brian May is going to show up. Wouldn't that be awesome to play with us?
Oh yeah. That would, and occasionally on Queen you get Roger Taylor singing a song
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, yeah, Queen. You can't say anything bad about Queen in my book.
No. All right. So when we were putting the show together, we've had some video work done by our friend Shane. We're really looking forward to doing stuff with him in the future. I keep kind of teasing it. Ooh, we've got stuff coming up, but we're also creeping up on our 100th episode. So I think we're going to kind of relaunch some stuff and do some fun stuff going into 2025 that Shane will be a bigger part of. But when we were getting ready to do this show, Shane sent us a message and said, look, you got to talk about this Bad Religion album, No Control. So we said we would. And, I was familiar with Bad Religion when they achieved a bit of the commercial success that they did in the 1990s with 21st Century Boy. Cool song. I really enjoyed listening to this album, though. It's consistently good from beginning to end and actually prompted me to do a deeper dive into their music. Bad Religion's like my favorite kind of punk band. Their songs have that driving energy, but it's not a case of every song on the album sounding the same. Greg Graffin should be a name I knew before I listened to this album. Shame on me for that. His lyrics are intelligent and on point, and the harmonies that come out of this band are so tight.
80s punk is often overlooked. There's a ton of great bands, and within that umbrella punk, there's a lot of variety. You get more hardcore with Cro-Mags, and you work your way on down to something a little bit lighter through Bad Brains, Adolescence, 7 Seconds, Dead Kennedys, and then Dead Milkmen. No Religion sits right in the middle. It's perfect punk. The songs are really short, sweet. They're a precursor to that pop punk style that becomes mainstream,
Yeah, yeah. And
but they don't overdo it by sounding pretty.
no,
They
no.
still got that edge to them.
But there's still great melody in what they're putting
Yes.
out there. Yeah.
And he also tried to slip in a Wu-Tang album too.
And he would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for us meddling kids.
Arr.
Actually, it had enough votes to make the show. It would have been in our 5 albums discussed, but it was the wrong year, and it's celebrating its 31st anniversary this year. So sorry, Shane, we will Wu-Tang you in 4 years.
It got an honorable mention. And that's a killer Wu-Tang album
It
too.
is.
So
It is. Why not get excited about it? It's worth getting excited about. So there we go. We have now finished the November, December, January albums. And like I said, there's still a lot of good music in there. Unfortunately, if we tried to put them between one month or the other, there would not have been enough to really talk about.
I think November we would have been okay. December would have been let's bash Mariah Carey again.
Yeah, but London Calling was December.
Well, we could have come on and did a listening party to that album.
Yeah, that's true.
Listen along, comment on every song. Just another excuse to listen to the album.
That's not a bad idea. Jim, with me sitting there going, I don't know the name of this one. Name this song, Jim. No, bad Jim. Learn the Clash. It's been a lot of fun. So I do think the next episode we're going to do is a wrap up, an old school Jam Yearbook show where we wrap up 2024.
Hey, we're gonna add more songs to our mega playlist,
We
aren't
we are. We're gonna have to add some more songs. Maybe we'll try to just tease the audience and find out what they like for songs. I don't really know what to put in the poll for, the top, do it, go on a billboard and put the top 10 songs. We know we're going to get some Post Malone. We know we're going to get Shabuzi. We know there's
Yeah.
some stuff that's going to come along. So let's hope there's some stuff.
And Taylor.
And some Taylor will probably be there too. And that's fine. It's great to have such a diverse playlist. I look forward to putting that out there to see what people want to add to it, because now we only add to it once a year, but it's still fun to go back and listen to. I've thrown it on when I've been outside, spending the day, grilling, hanging out. And I don't know if there's a more diverse playlist that's over 1,000 songs long that covers 6 decades of music on Spotify. Because if there's a song on there that you don't like, you can just skip to the next one. And there's going to be something there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to doing it.
There's hits, there's obscure songs. Yeah, covers all genres pretty much.
Now,
so.
Matt, I'm going to enforce a rule here now that we stopped doing the monthly deep dives of new songs. So you're not allowed to take the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, however long it's going to think you need to, get into it to listen to everything since July when we changed.
Dude, I already got 4 of my 5 songs.
That's awesome. Good. I'm glad to hear that. I like that a lot. That's what we need.
I pretty much chose the songs that I was obsessing over most of the year. So
Excellent. All right. I think it's my turn to wrap it up.
wrap away. It is Christmas after all. Wrap this present up.
It is, and
put
Merry
under the
Christmas
tree.
and Happy New Year to you. And we probably won't get the next show
Thank
out
you.
until after we reach 2025. So, really thank you for giving us a great listening audience in 2024. And we look forward to bringing you a better, higher quality show every single year as we move ahead. We're doing this until we're 70. We've already decided this.
Hey, I'm all for that. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. We know you got plenty of options to choose from, and we want to thank you for spending your time with us.
Yeah. Until we see you again, peace, love, and podcast.
Lost in a memory.
Peace.